What is psychology? Psychology, derived from the Greek words psyche, mind/soul, and logia, study of, is the scientific study of the mind and behavior. Its etymology reflects the discipline's fundamental focus on understanding mental processes and behavior patterns. The history of psychology as a formal academic discipline can be traced back to the late 19th century, with Wilhelm Wundt establishing the first psychology laboratory in Leipzig, Germany, in 1879. However, the foundational ideas and theories that underpin contemporary psychology have been evolving since the time of the ancient Greeks, with notable contributions from philosophers such as Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. The study of psychology encompasses a broad range of topics, including cognition, emotion, perception, personality, behavior, and interpersonal relationships. Psychology employs a variety of research methods, including experimental designs, correlational studies, case studies, and qualitative approaches, to investigate these topics and generate empirical data. The overarching goal is to develop a comprehensive understanding of human behavior and mental processes, which can then be applied to address real-world problems and improve the human condition. Contemporary psychology is organized into several subdisciplines, each focusing on specific aspects of behavior and mental life. These include, but are not limited to, cognitive psychology, which examines mental processes such as attention, memory, and problem-solving; developmental psychology, which studies changes in behavior and mental abilities across the lifespan; social psychology, which investigates how people think about, influence, and relate to others; and clinical psychology, which focuses on the diagnosis, understanding, and treatment of mental, emotional, and behavioral disorders. The uses of psychology are vast and varied, spanning multiple domains of human activity. In the realm of mental health, psychology plays a crucial role in the assessment, diagnosis, and treatment of psychological disorders. Psychologists employ a range of therapeutic techniques, such as cognitive behavioral therapy, psychodynamic therapy, and humanistic therapy, to help individuals overcome mental health challenges and improve their overall well-being. Furthermore, psychology contributes to education, healthcare, business, and sports, among other fields, by providing insights into human behavior and offering evidence-based strategies for enhancing performance, productivity, and satisfaction. For instance, educational psychologists work to optimize learning environments and instructional methods, while industrial organizational psychologists focus on improving workplace dynamics and employee well-being. In summary, psychology is a diverse and dynamic discipline that offers valuable insights into the complexities of human behavior and mental life, with wide-ranging applications in various aspects of society. Psychology is the scientific and systematic study of behavior and mental processes. It encompasses a vast array of phenomena including cognition, emotion, perception, development, motivation, personality, and psychopathology, and integrates empirical methodologies and theoretical frameworks from both the natural and social sciences. Etymology. The term psychology is derived from the Greek words psyche, psy-kai, meaning soul, mind, or spirit, and logos, lambda gamma omicron, meaning discourse or study. Thus, etymologically, psychology was originally conceptualized as the study of the soul or doctrine of the mind. The term began to acquire its modern connotation in the 16th century, but it was not until the late 19th century that psychology emerged as a distinct empirical and academic discipline. Historical development. Pre-scientific roots. Philosophical foundations. Early psychological thought can be traced to classical Greek philosophy, notably the works of Plato, Aristotle, and Galen. These thinkers explored the nature of the soul, memory, perception, and emotion. Medieval scholasticism. Thinkers such as Aquinas synthesized Aristotelian psychology with Christian theology, emphasizing faculties of the soul and moral cognition. Modern emergence. 17th to 18th centuries, the rise of empiricism and rationalism, example Descartes, Locke, Hume, Kant, set the stage for psychology's scientific turn. Descartes' mind-body dualism was particularly influential in framing the problem of consciousness and self-awareness. 19th century, psychology emerged from philosophy and physiology as an independent field. Key developments include Wilhelm Wundt, 1879, established the first experimental psychology laboratory in Leipzig, often marking the formal birth of psychology as a science. Structuralism, Titchener, and functionalism, James, developed as competing schools. Psychophysics, Fechner, Helmholtz, Weber, laid the foundation for quantitative approaches to sensory perception. 20th century and beyond. Behaviorism, led by John B. Watson and later B. F. Skinner, this movement rejected introspection in favor of observable behavior and stimulus-response paradigms. Psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud introduced a metapsychological framework centered on unconscious processes, psychic conflict, and developmental stages. Humanistic psychology, in response to deterministic models, Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow emphasized agency, self-actualization, and holistic growth. Cognitive revolution, in the mid-20th century, psychology integrated information processing models, leading to cognitive science as an interdisciplinary enterprise involving linguistics, computer science, neuroscience, and psychology. Contemporary approaches. Current paradigms include cognitive neuroscience, evolutionary psychology, cultural psychology, and integrative biopsychosocial models. Major subfields of study. Cognitive psychology, study of mental processes such as memory, reasoning, language, and decision-making. Developmental psychology, examination of psychological growth and change across the lifespan. Clinical and counseling psychology, assessment, diagnosis, and treatment of psychological disorders, promotion of mental health and well-being. Social psychology, exploration of how individuals are influenced by social contexts, group dynamics, and interpersonal processes. Biopsychology/neuroscience, investigation of the neural substrates of behavior and cognition. Industrial organizational psychology, application of psychological principles to workplace environments and organizational behavior. Health psychology, interdisciplinary study of how biological, psychological, and social factors influence health and illness. Methodology. Psychology employs a diverse methodological arsenal, including experimental design, controlled laboratory studies to establish causal relationships. Psychometric assessment, development and validation of instruments to measure intelligence, personality, and other traits. Longitudinal and cross-sectional studies, used in developmental and epidemiological research. Neuroimaging and electrophysiological techniques, fMRI, EEG, PET scans for studying brain behavior correlations. Qualitative methods, interpretive techniques such as grounded theory and phenomenological analysis in clinical and cultural research. Applications and uses. Psychology serves both theoretical inquiry and practical application. Mental health interventions, development of evidence-based psychotherapies, example CBT, DBT, ACT. Educational systems, enhancing learning outcomes through cognitive and developmental principles. Legal and forensic contexts, criminal profiling, competency assessments, and jury behavior analysis. Public policy and health promotion, behavioral science informs interventions for addiction, vaccination uptake, and sustainable behavior. Human-computer interaction and AI, cognitive modeling contributes to interface design and machine learning systems. Conclusion. Psychology occupies a unique position at the confluence of the natural sciences, social sciences, and humanities. It endeavors not only to explain and predict behavior but also to enhance human well-being through rigorous empirical inquiry and ethical practice. As the discipline evolves, it continues to integrate new technologies and interdisciplinary insights, contributing to our understanding of what it means to be a conscious, social, and adaptive organism. To delve deeper into psychology, let's explore its theoretical orientations, key theories, and the application of psychological principles in various domains, using highly academic terminology. Theoretical orientations and key theories. Psychoanalysis, founded by Sigmund Freud, psychoanalysis posits that behavior and mental processes are influenced by unconscious motives and conflicts. Key concepts include the id, ego, and superego, as well as defense mechanisms and psychosexual development. Behaviorism, pioneered by John B. Watson and later expanded by B. F. Skinner, focuses on observable behavior and learning processes. It emphasizes the role of environmental stimuli and consequences in shaping behavior, with key principles such as classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and reinforcement schedules. Cognitive psychology. Cognitive psychology examines internal mental processes, such as attention, perception, memory, language, and problem solving. Key theories include Baddeley's model of working memory, Atkinson and Shiffrin's multi-store model of memory, and dual process theories of cognition. Humanistic psychology. Humanistic psychology, associated with figures like Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow, emphasizes subjective experiences, personal growth, and the whole individual. Key concepts include self-actualization, unconditional positive regard, and the hierarchy of needs. Evolutionary psychology. Evolutionary psychology applies evolutionary theory to understand psychological traits and mechanisms. It posits that many psychological adaptations have evolved to solve recurring problems in human ancestral environments, such as mate selection, kinship, and coalition formation. Social cognitive theory, developed by Albert Bandura, social cognitive theory emphasizes the dynamic interplay between cognition, behavior, and environmental factors. Key concepts include self-efficacy, observational learning, and reciprocal determinism. Application of psychological principles. Clinical psychology. Clinical psychologists employ evidence-based assessments and interventions to treat psychological disorders. They may use techniques such as cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, or acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, to help clients manage symptoms and improve functioning. Educational psychology. Educational psychologists apply psychological principles to optimize learning and instruction. They focus on areas such as student motivation, cognitive development, and individualized learning strategies to enhance educational outcomes and address learning disabilities. Industrial organizational, IO, psychology. IO psychologists study workplace behavior and apply psychological principles to improve organizational effectiveness. Their work includes employee selection and training, performance appraisal, leadership development, and organizational development interventions. Health psychology. Health psychology examines the biological, psychological, and social factors that influence health and illness. Health psychologists promote wellness and prevent disease through interventions targeting behavior change, stress management, and adherence to medical treatments. Sports psychology. Sports psychology applies psychological knowledge to enhance athletic performance and well-being. Sports psychologists work with athletes to develop mental skills, such as goal setting, visualization, and resilience, to improve performance and manage the psychological demands of competition. Forensic psychology. Forensic psychology involves the application of psychological principles to legal issues and the criminal justice system. Forensic psychologists may provide expert testimony, conduct assessments of competency and criminal responsibility, and develop treatment programs for offenders. Environmental psychology. Environmental psychology examines the interplay between individuals and their physical surroundings. It focuses on how environmental factors influence behavior, cognition, and emotion, with applications in areas such as architecture, urban planning, and conservation psychology. Emerging trends in psychology. Positive psychology. Positive psychology focuses on the scientific study of positive human functioning, including strengths, virtues, and well-being. It aims to complement traditional psychology's focus on pathology and dysfunction. Cultural psychology. Cultural psychology examines the role of culture in shaping psychological processes and behavior. It emphasizes the importance of cultural context in understanding human diversity and adapting psychological theories and practices to diverse cultural settings. Neuropsychology. Neuropsychology investigates the relationship between the brain and behavior, often employing neuroimaging techniques to study cognitive and affective processes. It has applications in areas such as brain injury rehabilitation, neurodegenerative diseases, and cognitive enhancement. Comparative psychology. Comparative psychology involves the study of animal behavior and cognition to understand the evolutionary origins and adaptive functions of psychological processes. It provides valuable insights into human psychology by examining homologous and analogous behaviors in non-human species. In conclusion, psychology is a vast and multifaceted discipline that offers a comprehensive framework for understanding the complexities of human behavior and mental life. Its theoretical orientations, key theories, and practical applications highlight the field's diversity and relevance to various domains of human activity. Here is a list of branches of psychology and their respective uses, presented in a concise and academic manner. Abnormal psychology, the study of atypical or abnormal patterns of behavior, emotions, and thoughts. It is used for the diagnosis, understanding, and treatment of psychological disorders, such as anxiety, depression, and schizophrenia. Behavioral psychology focuses on observable behavior and learning processes. It is used to understand and modify behaviors through techniques such as classical and operant conditioning, with applications in therapy, education, and animal training. Biological psychology, neuropsychology investigates the biological basis of behavior and mental processes, including the role of the brain, neurotransmitters, and genetics. It is used in the treatment of brain injuries, neurodegenerative diseases, and psychiatric disorders, as well as in cognitive enhancement. Clinical psychology, applied to the assessment, diagnosis, and treatment of mental, emotional, and behavioral disorders. Clinical psychologists use evidence-based therapies, such as CBT and psychodynamic therapy, to improve clients' well-being and functioning. Cognitive psychology examines internal mental processes, including perception, memory, attention, and problem-solving. It is used to develop models of cognition, improve educational practices, and enhance human-computer interaction. Comparative psychology studies animal behavior and cognition to understand the evolutionary origins of psychological processes. It is used to draw parallels between animal and human behavior, informing theories of human psychology and ethics in animal treatment. Consulting psychology focuses on providing expert advice and consultation to organizations and individuals to improve performance, leadership, and organizational effectiveness. Often used in business settings for organizational development and change management. Counseling psychology aims to facilitate personal and interpersonal functioning across the lifespan. Counseling psychologists provide therapy, career counseling, and support for issues such as relationship problems, stress, and life transitions. Cross-cultural psychology examines the influence of culture on behavior, thoughts, and emotions. It is used to develop culturally sensitive assessments and interventions, and to understand human diversity in a global context. Developmental psychology studies changes in behavior, cognition, and emotions across the lifespan, from infancy to old age. It is used to inform educational practices, parenting strategies, and policies related to child development and aging. Educational psychology applies psychological principles to optimize learning and instruction. It is used to develop effective teaching methods, assess student needs, and create supportive learning environments. Environmental psychology investigates the interplay between individuals and their physical surroundings. It is used in architecture, urban planning, and conservation efforts to create environments that promote well-being and sustainable behavior. Evolutionary psychology applies evolutionary theory to understand psychological traits and mechanisms. It is used to explain adaptive behaviors, such as mate selection and social bonding, and to inform theories of human nature. Forensic psychology applies psychological principles to legal issues and the criminal justice system. Forensic psychologists provide expert testimony, conduct assessments of competency and criminal responsibility, and develop treatment programs for offenders. Health psychology examines the biological, psychological, and social factors that influence health and illness. It is used to promote wellness, prevent disease, and improve adherence to medical treatments through behavioral interventions. Human factors psychology ergonomics studies the interaction between humans and their environments, focusing on design and safety. It is used to create user-friendly products, improve workplace safety, and enhance human performance in technological systems. Industrial organizational (IO) psychology studies workplace behavior and applies psychological principles to improve organizational effectiveness. It is used for employee selection, training, performance appraisal, and leadership development. Neuropsychology investigates the relationship between the brain and behavior, often using neuroimaging techniques. It is used in the assessment and rehabilitation of brain injuries, neurodegenerative diseases, and cognitive impairments. Positive psychology focuses on the scientific study of positive human functioning, including strengths, virtues, and well-being. It is used to develop interventions that enhance happiness, resilience, and overall life satisfaction. Psychometrics deals with the theory and technique of psychological measurement. It is used to develop and validate psychological tests, assessments, and scales for research and clinical practice. Quantitative psychology applies statistical and mathematical models to psychological data. It is used to develop new statistical methods, analyze complex data sets, and test theoretical models in psychology. Social psychology investigates how people think about, influence, and relate to others. It is used to understand social influence, attitudes, prejudice, and interpersonal relationships, with applications in marketing, education, and social policy. Sports psychology applies psychological knowledge to enhance athletic performance and well-being. It is used to develop mental skills, such as goal setting, visualization, and resilience, to improve performance and manage the psychological demands of competition. This list, while not exhaustive, provides a comprehensive overview of the diverse branches of psychology and their practical applications. Each branch contributes uniquely to the overarching goal of understanding the complexities of human behavior and mental life. What are the major schools of thought in psychology, and who are the key figures associated with each? The major schools of thought in psychology include psychoanalysis, founded by Sigmund Freud, focusing on the unconscious mind and defense mechanisms. Behaviorism, pioneered by John B. Watson and B. F. Skinner, emphasizing observable behavior and learning processes. Humanism, led by Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow, stressing subjective experiences and personal growth. Cognitivism, emerging from the work of Jean Piaget and Ulrich Nietzsche, concentrating on internal mental processes. Evolutionary psychology, influenced by Charles Darwin, applying evolutionary theory to understand psychological traits. How has the field of psychology evolved over time, and what are some of the significant historical events or discoveries? Psychology has evolved from philosophical inquiries into the mind to a scientific discipline with various subfields. Key historical events include Wilhelm Wundt establishing the first psychology laboratory in 1879, the development of psychoanalysis by Sigmund Freud, the behavioral revolution led by John B. Watson, and the cognitive revolution in the mid-20th century. Significant discoveries include the identification of conditioning principles, the understanding of cognitive biases, and advancements in neuropsychology. What are the basic research methods used in psychology, and how do they contribute to our understanding of human behavior? Basic research methods in psychology include experimental designs, manipulating variables to observe cause and effect relationships. Correlational studies, examining relationships between variables without manipulation. Case studies, in-depth analysis of individual subjects. Surveys and interviews, collecting self-reported data from participants. Observational studies, systematically watching and recording behavior. These methods contribute to our understanding by providing empirical data, identifying patterns, and testing theories about human behavior and mental processes. What are the primary branches of psychology, and what does each focus on? Primary branches of psychology include clinical psychology, diagnosis and treatment of mental, emotional, and behavioral disorders. Cognitive psychology, study of mental processes such as perception, memory, and problem-solving. Developmental psychology, changes in behavior and mental processes across the lifespan. Social psychology, influence of social factors on thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Biological psychology, neural and physiological bases of behavior. Industrial organizational psychology, application of psychological principles to workplace settings. Educational psychology, optimizing learning and instructional methods. Health psychology, biological, psychological, and social factors influencing health and illness. How does biological psychology explain behavior, and what role do the brain and neurotransmitters play? Biological psychology, or neuropsychology, explains behavior through the lens of biological processes. The brain and its structures, example cerebral cortex, limbic system, are crucial for various functions, including cognition, emotion, and behavior. Neurotransmitters, such as dopamine and serotonin, facilitate communication between neurons and influence mood, behavior, and cognitive functions. Abnormalities in these processes can lead to psychological disorders, highlighting the importance of biological factors in behavior. What are the key theories and principles of cognitive psychology, and how do they differ from other approaches? Key theories and principles in cognitive psychology include: information processing model. Humans process information through sensory input, perception, memory, and response. Dual process theory distinguishes between automatic, System 1, and controlled, System 2, cognitive processes. Schema theory, organized bodies of knowledge that influence perception and memory. Cognitive psychology differs from other approaches by focusing on internal mental processes and information processing, rather than observable behavior, behaviorism, or unconscious drives. Psychoanalysis. How does social psychology explain interpersonal behavior and group dynamics? Social psychology examines how people think about, influence, and relate to others. Key concepts include social influence, conformity, obedience, and compliance. Attitudes and prejudice, formation and change of attitudes, stereotyping, and discrimination. Interpersonal relationships, attraction, love, and conflict resolution. Group dynamics, group cohesion, leadership, and decision-making. Social psychology uses experimental and correlational methods to understand these phenomena and apply findings to real-world situations, such as improving interpersonal relationships and organizational dynamics. What are the main therapeutic approaches used in clinical psychology, and how effective are they? Main therapeutic approaches in clinical psychology include cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, identifying and changing negative thought patterns and behaviors. Psychodynamic therapy, exploring unconscious conflicts and past experiences to gain insight. Humanistic therapy, emphasizing personal growth, self-actualization, and the therapeutic relationship. Interpersonal therapy, IPT, focusing on improving communication skills and relationships. Dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, teaching mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotion regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness. The effectiveness of these approaches varies, but many have strong empirical support, with CBT and DBT being particularly well supported for a range of psychological disorders. How does developmental psychology study changes in behavior and mental processes across the lifespan? Developmental psychology studies changes in behavior, cognition, and emotion from infancy to old age. Key areas of focus include cognitive development, changes in thinking, problem solving, and learning. Social and emotional development, formation of self-concept, emotional regulation, and social skills. Moral development, changes in moral reasoning and behavior. Physiological development, changes in motor skills, sensory abilities, and brain development. Developmental psychologists use longitudinal and cross-sectional studies to track changes over time and understand the factors influencing development, such as genetics, environment, and culture. What are some of the ethical considerations and guidelines that psychologists must follow in their research and practice? Ethical considerations in psychology include informed consent, ensuring participants understand the research or treatment and voluntarily agree to participate. Confidentiality, protecting personal information and maintaining privacy. Debriefing, providing an explanation of the study and addressing any questions or concerns participants may have. Avoiding harm, minimizing physical and psychological discomfort and maximizing benefits. Bias and objectivity, remaining impartial and avoiding personal biases in research and practice. Cultural competence, understanding and respecting cultural differences and tailoring interventions accordingly. The American Psychological Association, APA, provides guidelines and standards for ethical conduct in psychology, which include these and other principles to ensure the welfare and rights of research participants and clients are protected. How does psychology contribute to our understanding of mental health and the treatment of psychological disorders? Psychology contributes to the understanding and treatment of mental health disorders through diagnosis, using standardized assessments and interviews to identify and classify psychological disorders. Therapeutic interventions, providing evidence-based treatments, such as CBT, psychodynamic therapy, and medication management. Research, investigating the causes, correlates, and treatments of mental health disorders. Prevention, developing programs to promote mental well-being and prevent the onset of disorders. Advocacy, raising awareness and reducing stigma associated with mental health issues. Psychology plays a crucial role in improving mental health outcomes by integrating biological, psychological, and social factors in the assessment and treatment of disorders. What are some of the applications of psychology in everyday life, such as in education, workplace settings, and sports? Applications of psychology in everyday life include education, improving learning outcomes through effective teaching strategies, classroom management, and educational assessments. Workplace, enhancing employee satisfaction, productivity, and organizational effectiveness through selection, training, and leadership development. Sports, optimizing performance through mental skills training, goal setting, and resilience building. Health, promoting healthy behaviors, disease prevention, and adherence to medical treatments. Consumer behavior, understanding and influencing consumer choices and marketing strategies. Psychology provides valuable insights and techniques to improve various aspects of daily life, from enhancing personal well-being to optimizing organizational performance. How does positive psychology focus on well-being and happiness, and what are some of its key concepts and practices? Positive psychology focuses on promoting well-being, happiness, and fulfillment. Key concepts and practices include PERMA model, positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment. Gratitude, cultivating appreciation for the good things in life. Mindfulness, being present and engaged in the current moment. Strengths-based approach, identifying and leveraging personal strengths and virtues. Flow, achieving a state of complete absorption and enjoyment in an activity. Positive psychology interventions, such as gratitude journals and strength-based coaching, have been shown to enhance well-being and life satisfaction. What are some of the current trends and future directions in psychological research and practice? Current trends and future directions in psychology include neuroscience and psychology integration, using advanced brain imaging techniques to understand the neural bases of behavior and mental processes. Cultural psychology, examining the role of culture in shaping psychological processes and behaviors. Positive psychology, expanding the focus on well-being, resilience, and fulfillment. Mindfulness and meditation, investigating the benefits and mechanisms of mindfulness practices for mental and physical health. Technology and psychology, utilizing virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and mobile apps for assessment, intervention, and research. Personalized medicine, tailoring psychological treatments to individual genetic, biological, and environmental factors. Social justice and psychology, addressing systemic inequalities and promoting social justice through psychological research and practice. Let us embark on a rigorous exploration of psychology by delineating its primary theoretical orientations, synthesizing seminal theories, and elucidating the application of psychological principles across diverse domains. This analysis will employ advanced academic terminology to reflect the intellectual depth of the subject. A. Theoretical orientations in psychology. Psychology encompasses a constellation of theoretical paradigms, each offering unique ontological and epistemological assumptions about human behavior and mental processes. 1. Psychodynamic perspective. Rooted in the foundational work of Sigmund Freud, the psychodynamic orientation posits that unconscious drives, intrapsychic conflict, and early developmental experiences are central determinants of behavior. Central constructs include the id, ego, and superego, as well as mechanisms of defense, example repression, projection. Neo-Freudian theorists, such as Carl Jung, Alfred Adler, and Karen Horney, expanded upon this framework, integrating aspects of collective unconsciousness, inferiority complexes, and socio-cultural factors. 2. Behaviorist perspective. Emerging from the empirical traditions of John B. Watson, B. F. Skinner, and Ivan Pavlov, behaviorism emphasizes observable behavior and the environmental contingencies that shape it. Classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and reinforcement schedules constitute key explanatory mechanisms. This orientation eschews introspective methods in favor of experimental rigor and replicability. 3. Humanistic existential perspective. This paradigm centers on human agency, self-actualization, and the phenomenological experience of existence. Proponents such as Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow emphasized the actualizing tendency, unconditional positive regard, and the hierarchy of needs. The existential branch, informed by philosophers like Soren Kierkegaard and Jean-Paul Sartre, focuses on issues such as authenticity, anxiety, and freedom of choice. 4. Cognitive perspective. The cognitive revolution of the mid-20th century reintegrated mental processes into psychological discourse. Theories by Jean Piaget, Albert Bandura, Aaron Beck, and Ulrich Neisser explore how individuals perceive, encode, store, and retrieve information. Key constructs include schema theory, cognitive distortions, and information processing models. 5. Biopsychological and neuroscientific approaches. This orientation investigates the neurophysiological and genetic substrates of behavior. Techniques such as functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, electroencephalography, EEG, and genome-wide association studies, GWAS, enable the elucidation of the neural correlates of cognition and emotion. 6. Evolutionary psychology. Anchored in Darwinian theory, evolutionary psychology posits that psychological mechanisms are adaptations shaped by natural and sexual selection. Research in this domain addresses mate selection, kin altruism, and modular cognitive architecture. 7. Socio-cultural perspective. This framework, influenced by Lev Vygotsky and later Bronfenbrenner, emphasizes the embeddedness of individual cognition within cultural, societal, and historical contexts. Constructs such as zone of proximal development, cultural scripts, and social constructionism are central. B. Key theoretical constructs. Several theoretical constructs have become canonical within psychology. Attachment theory, John Bowlby, Mary Ainsworth emphasizes the developmental importance of early emotional bonds. Cognitive dissonance, Leon Festinger proposes that individuals experience psychological discomfort when holding incongruent cognitions, motivating attitudinal change. Social learning theory, Albert Bandura posits that behavior is learned observationally through modeling and vicarious reinforcement. Self-determination theory, Deci and Ryan focuses on intrinsic motivation and the fulfillment of autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Theory of planned behavior, Agin articulates the role of intention, attitudes, subjective norms, and perceived behavioral control in predicting behavior. See applications of psychological principles. Psychological science is deeply entrenched in multiple applied contexts, each leveraging specific theoretical and empirical insights. 1. Clinical and counseling psychology. Informed by diagnostic frameworks such as the DSM-5-TR and ICD-11, clinical practitioners utilize evidence-based interventions, including cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, and psychodynamic psychotherapy, to treat psychopathology. 2. Organizational and industrial psychology. This subdiscipline applies psychological principles to optimize human performance in work settings, focusing on personnel selection, organizational behavior, job satisfaction, and occupational health psychology. Models such as the Job Demands Resources, JDR, model and transformational leadership theory are foundational. 3. Educational psychology. Educational psychologists investigate the cognitive and affective processes underpinning learning. Theories such as constructivism, metacognition, and motivation theory, example expectancy value theory, are pivotal in designing effective pedagogical interventions. 4. Health psychology. This domain examines the biopsychosocial determinants of health and illness. Constructs such as the health belief model, theory of reasoned action and stress, and coping theory, Lazarus and Folkman, are employed in behavioral interventions and chronic disease management. 5. Forensic psychology. Forensic psychologists operate at the nexus of psychology and law, conducting competency evaluations, risk assessments, and criminal profiling. The field also engages with theories of aggression, moral development, and recidivism. 6. Environmental and ecopsychology. This emergent area explores the psychological dimensions of human-environment interactions. Topics include place attachment, environmental identity, and pro-environmental behavior, as well as the psychological impact of climate change and ecological grief. Psychology, as both a science and a profession, comprises a diverse array of paradigms and theoretical systems. Its intellectual lineage spans intrapsychic processes, behavioral conditioning, cognitive computation, and socio-cultural embeddedness. Applications of psychological knowledge permeate clinical, educational, organizational, and forensic spheres, underscoring the discipline's expansive relevance and utility. Below is a concise and academically framed list of major branches of psychology, each accompanied by its principal domains of application and utility. 1. Clinical psychology. Focus: diagnosis and treatment of mental disorders. Application: psychotherapy, psychological assessment, behavioral interventions, crisis management. 2. Counseling psychology. Focus: emotional, social, vocational, and developmental concerns. Application: life transitions, academic and career counseling, stress and coping support. 3. Developmental psychology. Focus: psychological growth across the lifespan. Application: child and adolescent development, aging studies, educational planning, intervention design. 4. Cognitive psychology. Focus: mental processes such as perception, memory, language, and problem solving. Application: cognitive rehabilitation, human-computer interaction, artificial intelligence modeling. 5. Biological, or physiological, psychology. Focus: neural, genetic, and biological substrates of behavior. Application: neuropsychology, psychopharmacology, brain imaging, biopsychological assessment. 6. Social psychology. Focus: social behavior and interpersonal processes. Application: group dynamics, attitude formation, persuasion, prejudice reduction, public policy. 7. Industrial organizational psychology. Focus: behavior in workplace and organizational settings. Application: personnel selection, performance appraisal, occupational health, leadership training. 8. Educational psychology. Focus: learning processes and instructional practices. Application: curriculum development, special education, learner assessment, motivation enhancement. 9. Forensic psychology. Focus: psychology within legal and criminal justice systems. Application: competency evaluations, criminal profiling, expert testimony, risk assessment. 10. Health psychology. Focus: psychological factors in health, illness, and healthcare. Application: chronic illness management, health behavior change, stress reduction, patient adherence. 11. Environmental psychology. Focus: human interaction with physical and built environments. Application: urban planning, sustainability initiatives, disaster response, environmental design. 12. Comparative psychology. Focus: behavioral comparison across species. Application: evolutionary theory, animal behavior studies, cross-species cognition research. 13. Sport and exercise psychology. Focus: psychological factors in physical performance and well-being. Application: athletic performance enhancement, injury rehabilitation, exercise motivation. 14. Personality psychology. Focus: individual differences in characteristic patterns of thinking, feeling, and behavior. Application: personality assessment, trait theory application, psychotherapy integration. 15. Cultural and cross-cultural psychology. Focus: cultural influences on psychological processes. Application: culturally competent therapy, globalization studies, ethnopsychological research. Below is a highly intensified 6-week psychology course designed for advanced learners or those seeking an academically rigorous introduction to psychology. This course is structured to mirror graduate-level foundations or accelerated undergraduate honors curricula. Course title: Intensive Foundations of Psychological Science. Duration: 6 weeks, 5 sessions per week, 90 minutes/session. Course format: lecture-based with integrated seminars, case analyses, experimental critique, and application exercises. Weekly assessments and final integrative evaluation. Target audience: advanced undergraduates, early graduate students, or professionals in adjacent disciplines, example education, law, health sciences. Week 1, Foundations of Psychological Thought and Methodology. Topics: Historical paradigms, structuralism, functionalism, behaviorism, gestalt, psychoanalysis. Contemporary perspectives, cognitive, biological, socio-cultural, evolutionary. Scientific method in psychology, operationalization, hypothesis testing, replication crisis. Quantitative versus qualitative methodologies. Ethics in Human and Animal Research, APA, IRB Guidelines. Assignments: critical essay, Paradigm Shifts in Psychological Science. Analysis of empirical article methodology. Week 2, Biological Basis of Behavior. Topics: neuroanatomy and neurophysiology, neurotransmission and psychopharmacology, brain imaging techniques, fMRI, PET, EEG, genetics and epigenetics in behavior, biological rhythms and consciousness, lab/activity, virtual brain dissection and lesion mapping, case analysis, Phineas Gage, neuroplasticity studies, assessment, quiz, brain structures and functions. Week 3, Cognitive and Developmental Processes. Topics: information processing models, attention, memory systems, language acquisition and comprehension, intelligence theories and psychometric testing, Piaget and Vygotsky developmental theory, attachment theory and socio-emotional development. Seminar discussion: the nature versus nurture continuum in cognitive development. Project: cognitive task analysis, example Stroop test or memory span experiment. Week 4, emotion, motivation, and personality. Topics: theories of emotion, James Lang, Cannon-Bard, Schachter-Singer. Motivational systems, biological, intrinsic/extrinsic, humanistic views. Personality theories, psychoanalytic, trait, Big Five, humanistic, social cognitive. Personality assessment instruments, MMPI, Neo-PI-R. Assignment: personality case profile using trait theory and psychodynamic constructs. Week 5, Social and Abnormal Psychology. Topics: social cognition, attitudes, persuasion, Elm, conformity and obedience, Milgram, Ash. Group processes and intergroup relations. Diagnostic classification, DSM-5-TR criteria. Major disorders, anxiety, mood, schizophrenia, personality disorders. Cultural and ethical implications of diagnosis. Debate. Pathologizing the normal, cultural boundaries in mental health diagnosis. Assessment. Midterm case analysis, diagnostic formulation and theoretical orientation. Week 6, Applied Psychology and Integration. Topics: health psychology and behavioral medicine. Forensic applications, eyewitness memory, competency, profiling. Industrial organizational psychology, job analysis, leadership, motivation. Educational and counseling interventions. Integration of perspectives, biopsychosocial model. Final projects. Group presentations, intervention proposals in applied domains, clinical, educational, organizational. Final cumulative exam, essay plus short answer. Deliverables and evaluation. Participation, 10%. Weekly quizzes, 20%. Assignments and case analyses, 30%. Group project, 15%. Final examination, 25%. Required readings, selected chapters/articles. Myers and DeWall, Psychology, 13th ed. Calat, Biological Psychology. Kazhdan, Research Design in Clinical Psychology. Peer-reviewed journal articles, example Psychological Science, JAMA Psychiatry, Annual Review of Psychology. Create a 6-week class on psychology, highly intensified. 6-week intensive psychology class. Week 1, Introduction to Psychology and Research Methods. Day 1 to 2, Introduction to Psychology. Definition and Scope of Psychology. Brief History of Psychology, from ancient philosophers to modern psychologists. Major schools of thought: psychoanalysis, behaviorism, humanism, and cognitivism. 1, 2, 3. Key figures and their contributions, example Freud, Watson, Rogers, Bandura. Day 3 to 5, Research Methods in Psychology. Experimental designs, correlational studies, and case studies. Qualitative and quantitative research methods. Ethical considerations in psychological research. Hands-on activity, designing a simple research study. Day 6 to 7, Review and Assignment. Review of key concepts from the week. Assignment: write a short essay on the history of psychology and the contributions of a major psychologist. Week 2, Biological Basis of Behavior and Sensation/Perception. Day 1 to 3, Biological Psychology. Neural basis of behavior, neurons, synapses, and neurotransmitters. Brain structures and their functions, example cerebral cortex, limbic system, brainstem. Psychopharmacology, drugs and behavior. Day 4 to 6, Sensation and Perception. Sensory systems, visual, auditory, olfactory, gustatory, and somatosensory. Perceptual organization and Gestalt principles. Perceptual illusions and their explanations. Day 7, Review and Quiz. Review of key concepts from the week. Quiz on biological psychology and sensation/perception. Week 3, Learning and Memory. Day 1 to 3, Learning. Classical conditioning, Pavlov's experiments and applications. Operant conditioning, Skinner's work and reinforcement schedules. Observational learning, Bandura's social learning theory. Day 4 to 6, Memory. Memory systems, sensory, short-term, and long-term memory. Memory processes, encoding, storage, and retrieval. Forgetting and memory enhancement techniques. Day 7, Review and Assignment. Review of key concepts from the week. Assignment: design an experiment to study either learning or memory. Week 4, Cognition and Language. Day 1 to 3, Cognitive Psychology. Problem-solving and decision-making processes. Schemas, scripts, and mental models. Expertise and cognitive heuristics. Day 4 to 6, Language and Thought. Language acquisition, nativist and empiricist views. Grammar and syntax, Chomsky's transformational grammar. Thought and language, Whorfian hypothesis and linguistic relativity. Day 7, Review and Quiz. Review of key concepts from the week. Quiz on cognition and language. Week 5, Developmental Psychology and Personality. Day 1 to 3, Developmental Psychology. Lifespan development, infancy, childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and old age. Cognitive, social, and emotional development. Influential theorists, Piaget, Erikson, and Vygotsky. Day 4 to 6, Personality Psychology. Traits, states, and situations in personality. Psychoanalytic, humanistic, and trait theories of personality. Assessment tools, interviews, questionnaires, and projective tests. Day 7, Review and Assignment. Review of key concepts from the week. Assignment: compare and contrast two major theories of personality. Week 6, Abnormal Psychology and Therapeutic Interventions. Day 1 to 3, Abnormal Psychology. Definition and classification of psychological disorders. Etiology of psychological disorders, biological, psychological, and social factors. Specific disorders, anxiety, mood, psychotic, and personality disorders. Day 4 to 6, Therapeutic Interventions. Psychodynamic, humanistic, and cognitive behavioral therapies. Evidence-based treatments and their effectiveness. Case studies and therapeutic techniques. Day 7, Final Review and Exam. Comprehensive review of all topics covered in the course. Final exam assessing knowledge and understanding of psychology. Additional resources and activities. Guest lectures, invite professionals from various psychology fields to share their experiences and insights. Group discussions, facilitate discussions on ethical dilemmas, case studies, and current events in psychology. Research projects, encourage students to conduct small-scale research projects or literature reviews on topics of interest. Clinical exercises, role-playing exercises to practice therapeutic techniques and interview skills. This 6-week intensive psychology class provides a comprehensive overview of the field, covering key theories, research methods, and applications. It is designed to be rigorous and engaging, with a mix of lectures, discussions, and hands-on activities. Questions to ask about psychology. What is the definition and scope of psychology? What are the major schools of thought in psychology, and who are the key figures associated with each? How has the field of psychology evolved over time, and what are some of the significant historical events or discoveries? What are the basic research methods used in psychology, and how do they contribute to our understanding of human behavior? What are the primary branches of psychology, and what does each focus on? How does biological psychology explain behavior, and what role do the brain and neurotransmitters play? What are the key theories and principles of cognitive psychology, and how do they differ from other approaches? How does social psychology explain interpersonal behavior and group dynamics? What are the main therapeutic approaches used in clinical psychology, and how effective are they? How does developmental psychology study changes in behavior and mental processes across the lifespan? What are some of the ethical considerations and guidelines that psychologists must follow in their research and practice? How does psychology contribute to our understanding of mental health and the treatment of psychological disorders? What are some of the applications of psychology in everyday life, such as in education, workplace settings, and sports? How does positive psychology focus on well-being and happiness, and what are some of its key concepts and practices? What are some of the current trends and future directions in psychological research and practice? Answers to the questions. What is the definition and scope of psychology? Psychology is the scientific study of the mind and behavior. Its scope includes the examination of conscious and unconscious phenomena, as well as feeling and thought. Psychology aims to understand the role of mental functions in individual and social behavior, while also exploring the physiological and biological processes that underlie cognitive functions and behaviors. Below is a curated list of foundational and conceptually rich questions designed to provide a comprehensive understanding of psychology. Each question is followed by a concise, academically grounded answer. 1. What is psychology, and how is it defined today? Answer. Psychology is the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. It seeks to understand the mechanisms underlying cognition, emotion, perception, motivation, personality, and social interaction through empirical investigation and theoretical modeling. Contemporary psychology integrates biological, psychological, and socio-cultural levels of analysis. 2. What are the main goals of psychology as a discipline? Answer. The core goals of psychology are description, observing and cataloging behavior and mental processes. Explanation, identifying causal factors and theoretical mechanisms. Prediction, anticipating future behavior under specific conditions. Control/modification, applying knowledge to influence outcomes, example in therapy, education, or organizational contexts. 3. What are the primary branches or subfields within psychology? Answer. Major subfields include clinical psychology, diagnosis and treatment of mental disorders. Cognitive psychology, study of mental functions like memory and perception. Developmental psychology, human growth across the lifespan. Social psychology, interpersonal behavior and societal influences. Biopsychology, biological underpinnings of behavior. Industrial organizational psychology, behavior in workplace settings. Educational psychology, psychological principles in teaching and learning. Forensic psychology, application within legal systems. 4. How does psychology differ from psychiatry or sociology? Answer. Psychology emphasizes empirical investigation of mental processes and behavior, often through both experimental and applied methodologies. Psychiatry is a medical discipline focused on mental illness, capable of prescribing pharmacological treatments. Sociology examines societal structures, institutions, and group behavior, typically at a macro level, while psychology focuses more on the individual or small group level. 5. What research methods are commonly used in psychology? Answer. Psychology employs both quantitative and qualitative methods, including experiments, controlled testing of hypotheses, correlational studies, assessing relationships between variables, case studies, in-depth analysis of individuals or groups, surveys and questionnaires, observational studies, meta-analyses. Each method adheres to ethical guidelines and aims for validity, reliability, and replicability. 6. What are the major theoretical perspectives in psychology? Answer. Behaviorism focuses on observable behaviors shaped by environment. Cognitive psychology explores internal mental processes. Psychoanalytic/psychodynamic theory investigates unconscious motives and early experiences. Humanistic psychology emphasizes self-actualization and subjective experience. Biological psychology studies the physiological basis of behavior. Evolutionary psychology examines adaptive value of psychological traits. Socio-cultural perspective investigates cultural and societal influences on behavior. 7. How is psychological knowledge applied in real-world contexts? Answer. Applications include mental health treatment, clinical psychology, counseling, educational interventions, learning strategies, special education, organizational development, leadership, motivation, productivity, forensic assessment, criminal profiling, competency evaluations, health promotion, behavioral medicine, patient compliance, public policy and social change, attitude change, prejudice reduction. 8. What is the importance of ethics in psychological research and practice? Answer. Ethical standards ensure the protection of participants' rights and the integrity of research. Core principles include informed consent, confidentiality, minimization of harm, debriefing, scientific integrity. Governing bodies such as the American Psychological Association, APA, and institutional review boards, IRBs, enforce these guidelines. 9. How does culture influence psychological processes? Answer. Culture shapes cognition, emotion, values, and social behavior. Cross-cultural psychology reveals that psychological constructs, example self-concept, moral reasoning, are not universal and must be understood within socio-cultural contexts. This has implications for diagnosis, treatment, and research generalizability. 10. What are some of the current debates or emerging issues in psychology? Answer. The replication crisis, concerns about reproducibility of psychological findings. Nature versus nurture, ongoing refinement of their interaction in development. Artificial intelligence and cognitive modeling, interface between psychology and technology. Neuroethics, moral issues surrounding brain-based interventions. Cultural competency, necessity of adapting practice across diverse populations. Below is a text-based study guide for foundational concepts in psychology. It is structured into clearly defined sections with concise definitions, key figures, major theories, and review questions to facilitate comprehension and retention. Psychology Study Guide. Definition and goals of psychology. Definition. Psychology is the scientific study of behavior and mental processes, encompassing both the observable actions and the internal experiences of individuals. Primary goals. Describe, observe and detail behaviors and mental processes. Explain, understand underlying causes and mechanisms. Predict, anticipate how people will behave in various situations. Control/modify, apply knowledge to influence behavior constructively. Two major branches of psychology. Branch focus applications. Clinical psychology, mental disorders, diagnosis, and therapy, psychotherapy, diagnostics. Cognitive psychology, thought, memory, perception, learning, decision-making, AI modeling. Developmental psychology, psychological growth across the lifespan, education, child psychology. Social psychology, interpersonal and group behavior, persuasion, stereotypes, group dynamics. Biological, neuro, psychology, neural and physiological basis of behavior, brain imaging, neuropsychology. Industrial, organizational, human behavior in work settings, hiring, performance, motivation. Educational psychology, learning processes and teaching effectiveness, curriculum design, instructional methods. Forensic psychology, psychology within legal systems, competency evaluations, eyewitness testimony. Health psychology, psychological factors in health and illness, stress management, behavioral interventions. Environmental psychology, human interaction with environments, urban planning, sustainability, behavior. 3 theoretical perspectives. 1. Behaviorism. Focus, observable behavior shaped by environmental stimuli. Key figures, John B. Watson, B. F. Skinner. Concepts, classical and operant conditioning. 2. Psychoanalytic/psychodynamic. Focus, unconscious motives, early childhood experiences. Key figures, Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung. Concepts, ID, ego, superego, defense mechanisms. 3. Humanistic psychology. Focus, personal growth, self-actualization, free will. Key figures, Carl Rogers, Abraham Maslow. Concepts, hierarchy of needs, unconditional positive regard. 4. Cognitive psychology. Focus, internal mental processes, memory, reasoning, language. Key figures, Jean Piaget, Ulrich Nieser. Concepts, schemas, cognitive distortions, information processing. 5. Biological psychology. Focus, brain structure, neurotransmitters, genetics. Key concepts, brain regions, neural pathways, epigenetics. 6. Evolutionary psychology. Focus, adaptive value of behavior and cognition. Key concepts, natural selection, reproductive strategies. 7. Socio-cultural perspective. Focus, social and cultural influences on behavior. Key figures, Lev Vygotsky. Concepts, social norms, cultural scripts, socialization. 4. Research methods. 1. Experimental. Control and manipulation of variables to infer causality. 2. Correlational. Examines relationships between variables, does not infer causality. 3. Observational. Naturalistic or controlled observation of behavior. 4. Survey and self-report. Collection of data from individuals via questionnaires or interviews. 5. Case study. In-depth analysis of a single subject or group. 6. Meta-analysis. Statistical combination of results from multiple studies. Key terms and concepts, expanded. 1. Neurotransmitters. Chemical messengers that transmit signals across synapses between neurons. Key examples. Dopamine, associated with reward, motivation, motor control, implicated in schizophrenia, Parkinson's. Serotonin, regulates mood, sleep, appetite, linked to depression, anxiety. Norepinephrine, involved in arousal, attention, stress response. GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid, inhibitory neurotransmitter, reduces neuronal excitability. Acetylcholine, involved in learning and memory, deficits linked to Alzheimer's disease. 2. Classical conditioning, Pavlov. Learning through association. Unconditioned stimulus, UCS, rightward arrow naturally elicits response. Conditioned stimulus, CS, rightward arrow neutral stimulus becomes associated with UCS. Conditioned response, CR, rightward arrow learned response to CS. 3. Operant conditioning, Skinner. Learning based on consequences. Positive reinforcement, adding a desirable stimulus to increase behavior. Negative reinforcement, removing an aversive stimulus to increase behavior. Punishment, applying or removing stimuli to decrease behavior. 4. Attachment theory, Bowlby and Ainsworth. Emphasizes the significance of early emotional bonds. Secure attachment, associated with healthy development. Insecure avoidant / insecure ambivalent / disorganized, associated with developmental challenges. 5. Cognitive dissonance, Festinger. Psychological discomfort caused by inconsistency between beliefs or behaviors, often motivating attitude change. 6. The Big Five personality traits, Ocean. Openness to experience. Conscientiousness. Extroversion. Agreeableness. Neuroticism. 7. DSM-5-TR. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, text revision. It provides standardized criteria for the classification of psychological disorders. 6. Major psychological disorders, overview. Disorder category examples core features. Anxiety disorders generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder excessive fear, avoidance behavior, physiological hyperarousal. Mood disorders major depressive disorder, bipolar disorder disturbances in mood, energy, and affect. Schizophrenia spectrum schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder delusions, hallucinations, disorganized thinking. Personality disorders borderline, antisocial, narcissistic maladaptive personality traits, interpersonal dysfunction. Neurodevelopmental disorders ADHD, autism spectrum disorder early onset cognitive and behavioral impairments. Obsessive-compulsive and related OCD, body dysmorphic disorder intrusive thoughts, repetitive behaviors. Trauma and stressor-related PTSD, acute stress disorder re-experiencing trauma, avoidance, hyperarousal. Eating disorders anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa distorted body image, disordered eating patterns. 7. Psychotherapy and treatment modalities. Therapy type theoretical orientation core techniques. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, cognitive behavioral cognitive restructuring, behavioral experiments. Psychodynamic therapy Freudian/Neo-Freudian free association, transference, dream interpretation. Humanistic therapy client-centered, Rogers, unconditional positive regard, empathy, active listening. Behavioral therapy behaviorism exposure therapy, systematic desensitization, reinforcement. Mindfulness-based therapies cognitive experiential meditation, present-focused awareness, acceptance strategies. Biological/medical interventions biomedical pharmacotherapy, SSRIs, antipsychotics, mood stabilizers. Group and family therapies systems-oriented communication training, systemic reframing. 8. Cross-cultural and contemporary considerations. Cultural relativism versus universalism, examining whether psychological principles are culture-bound or generalizable. Cultural competence, ethical imperative in therapy and research. Global mental health, addressing disparities in access and stigma. Technological integration, telepsychology, digital CBT, AI in mental health. Trauma-informed practice, understanding the role of adverse experiences in psychological symptoms. 9. Review and integration questions. How do different theoretical perspectives explain human aggression? In what ways do cognitive and behavioral therapies complement or contradict each other? How does neuroplasticity challenge deterministic views of brain function? Discuss the role of early attachment in later personality development. What are the ethical implications of psychological research in vulnerable populations? How does culture influence the diagnosis and treatment of psychological disorders? Evaluate the scientific merits of psychoanalytic theory in contemporary practice. How does the biopsychosocial model integrate multiple perspectives in understanding health? What is the value and limitation of diagnostic labels in clinical practice? How can psychological science contribute to solutions for societal problems, example prejudice, addiction, education? X study tips for mastering psychology. Use dual coding, combine visual diagrams, example brain structures, with textual summaries. Engage in retrieval practice, use flashcards, quizzes, or teach others. Create concept maps, visualize relationships between theories and applications. Review empirical research, analyze real studies to understand methodology and implications. Link theory to practice, consider real-world examples of psychological principles. Let me know if you'd like this turned into a full printable booklet, summary handout, or converted into a structured test preparation format. Here's how psychology can be explained to 3 distinct audiences, each tailored to their level of understanding and cognitive sophistication. 1. To a child. Psychology is the study of how people think, feel, and act. It helps us understand why someone might be happy or sad, why we dream, or why we get scared. It's like being a detective for the mind, trying to figure out what's going on inside people's heads and hearts so we can help them feel better and get along with others. 2. To an adult, general public. Psychology is the scientific study of the mind and behavior. It examines how people think, feel, and act in different situations, using research and evidence to understand mental health, learning, memory, relationships, stress, and decision-making. Psychologists use this knowledge to help people improve their lives, whether through therapy, education, work environments, or health care. 3. To a PhD professor in an adjacent discipline. Psychology is a multifaceted scientific discipline that investigates behavior and mental processes through empirical methodologies, spanning biological, cognitive, developmental, social, and clinical domains. It integrates interdisciplinary approaches drawing from neuroscience, philosophy of mind, evolutionary theory, and cultural studies to model internal mechanisms such as cognition, emotion, motivation, and psychopathology. Methodologically, psychology employs both nomothetic and idiographic strategies, aiming not only to describe and predict human behavior but to intervene adaptively within applied settings. Here's a dictionary-style list of commonly used psychology words and terms, including concise definitions. Psychology Dictionary, A to Z. A. Abnormal psychology, the study of psychological disorders and abnormal behavior. Attachment, the emotional bond between a child and caregiver, important for development. B. Behaviorism, a psychological approach that emphasizes observable behaviors over internal processes. Bias, a tendency to think in a certain way that can lead to systematic deviations from a standard of rationality or good judgment. C. Cognition, mental processes involved in gaining knowledge and understanding, such as thinking, knowing, remembering, and problem solving. Cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort experienced when holding 2 conflicting beliefs or values. D. Defense mechanisms, unconscious psychological strategies used to cope with reality and maintain self-image, example denial, repression. Depression, a mood disorder characterized by persistent sadness, lack of interest, and other emotional and physical symptoms. E. Ego, in Freudian theory, the rational part of the personality that mediates between the id, superego, and reality. Empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. F. Freudian slip, an unintentional error regarded as revealing subconscious feelings. Fight or flight response, the body's automatic reaction to perceived danger, involving physiological changes. G. Groupthink, a psychological phenomenon where the desire for group consensus overrides people's ability to critically evaluate alternatives. Gestalt psychology, a theory emphasizing that the whole of anything is greater than its parts, especially in perception. H. Hypothesis, a testable prediction about the relationship between 2 or more variables. Hallucination, a perception in the absence of external stimulus, example hearing voices that aren't there. ID, the part of the personality present at birth, containing instinctual drives and desires, Freud. Introversion, a personality trait characterized by a focus on internal feelings rather than external sources of stimulation. J. Just world hypothesis, the belief that people get what they deserve, and deserve what they get. L. Locus of control, the degree to which individuals believe they can control events affecting them. Learned helplessness, a condition in which a person suffers from a sense of powerlessness, often due to repeated negative experiences. M. Motivation, the process that initiates, guides, and sustains goal-oriented behaviors. Memory, the processes used to acquire, store, retain, and later retrieve information. N. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. Narcissism, excessive self-focus, self-admiration, and a lack of empathy for others. O. Operant conditioning, a method of learning that employs rewards and punishments for behavior, Skinner. Obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD, a disorder characterized by unwanted repetitive thoughts, obsessions, and/or actions, compulsions. P. Perception, the process of interpreting sensory information. Personality, an individual's characteristic pattern of thinking, feeling, and acting. R. Repression, a defense mechanism that involves unconsciously blocking unpleasant memories or desires. Resilience, the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. S. Schema, a cognitive framework that helps organize and interpret information. Self-actualization, the realization of one's full potential, a concept in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. T. Trauma, a deeply distressing or disturbing experience that can have lasting psychological effects. Transference, a psychoanalytic concept where patients project feelings about important people onto their therapist. U. Unconscious, the part of the mind that houses memories, desires, and feelings not within conscious awareness. Unconditioned response, in classical conditioning, an unlearned, naturally occurring reaction, example salivation to food. V. Validity, the extent to which a test measures what it claims to measure. Vicarious learning, learning by observing the behaviors of others and the consequences they face. W. Working memory, a cognitive system responsible for temporarily holding and manipulating information. Wilhelm Wundt, considered the father of experimental psychology, established the first psychology lab. Here are more commonly used psychology words and terms. A. Anxiety, a feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease, typically about an imminent event or something with an uncertain outcome. B. Behaviorism, a theory that focuses on observable behavior and learning, often associated with figures like B.F. Skinner and John Watson. C. Cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort experienced by a person who holds two or more contradictory beliefs, values, or ideas. Consciousness, the state of being awake and aware of one's surroundings and internal states. D. Defense mechanisms, unconscious psychological strategies that are used to protect oneself from anxiety and other unpleasant feelings, such as denial, projection, and repression. Depression, a mood disorder characterized by persistent feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and a loss of interest in daily activities. E. Ego, the rational part of the mind that mediates between the ID and the external world. F. Freudian slip, an error in speech, memory, or physical action that is believed to reveal an unconscious desire, thought, or feeling. H. Humanistic psychology, an approach that emphasizes the study of the whole person, including their subjective experiences and personal growth. I. ID, ego, and superego, concepts in Freudian psychology. ID, the primitive and instinctual part of the mind that contains the libido and aggressive drives. Introspection, the examination or observation of one's own mental and emotional processes. N. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change and adapt throughout life, including the formation of new neural connections and pathways. O. Oedipus complex, a stage of psychosexual development proposed by Freud, where a child has an unconscious sexual desire for the opposite-sex parent and feels jealous of the same-sex parent. P. Phobia, an intense, irrational fear of a specific object, activity, or situation. Psychoanalysis, a set of theories and therapeutic techniques used to treat mental disorders by investigating the interaction of conscious and unconscious elements in the mind. Psychosis, a severe mental disorder in which a person loses contact with reality, often experiencing hallucinations and delusions. R. Repression, an unconscious defense mechanism where painful or unacceptable thoughts, feelings, or experiences are pushed into the unconscious mind. S. Schizophrenia, a chronic, severe mental disorder characterized by distortions in thinking, perceptions, emotions, language, sense of self, and behavior. Self-actualization, the realization of one's full potential, including the desire to grow and become the best version of oneself, a concept often associated with Abraham Maslow. Superego, the moral part of the mind that incorporates the values and morals of society. Stimulus, anything in the environment that can trigger a response in an organism. T. Transference, the redirection of feelings and desires, especially those unconsciously retained from childhood, toward a new object, often the therapist in a therapeutic setting. U. Unconditional positive regard, a concept in humanistic psychology referring to the complete acceptance and support of a person regardless of what they say or do. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, a type of psychotherapy that helps patients understand the thoughts and feelings that influence behaviors. CBT is commonly used to treat a wide range of disorders, including depression, anxiety, and phobias. Here's an expanded list of psychology terms with more detailed definitions and additional entries. A. Affect, the experience of feeling or emotion. In psychology, affect refers to the subjective, conscious aspect of emotion, as opposed to the physiological or behavioral components. Aggression, behavior that is intended to cause harm or pain to another person or organism. Aggression can be physical, verbal, or relational, and it can be proactive, instrumental, or reactive, impulsive. Attachment, the emotional bond formed between infants and their primary caregivers, which serves as a prototype for future relationships. Attachment theory, developed by John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, identifies four main attachment styles: secure, anxious preoccupied, dismissive avoidant, and fearful avoidant. B. Behavioral activation, a therapy approach that focuses on increasing engagement in activities that bring a sense of accomplishment and pleasure, often used to treat depression and other mood disorders. Biofeedback, a mind-body technique that uses visual or auditory feedback to help individuals gain control over involuntary physiological processes, such as heart rate, muscle tension, and brain waves. C. Categorical imperative, a concept in philosophy, introduced by Immanuel Kant, which states that one should act only according to that maxim whereby you can, at the same time, will that it should become a universal law. This concept has been applied in psychology to understand moral development and decision-making. Classical conditioning, a type of learning in which a neutral stimulus becomes associated with a response that is originally elicited by a different stimulus. Pavlov's experiments with dogs are a classic example of classical conditioning. Cognitive distortions, irrational or maladaptive thought patterns that contribute to psychological distress. Examples include all-or-nothing thinking, overgeneralization, mental filter, discounting the positive, jumping to conclusions, magnification, and emotional reasoning. Collective unconscious, a concept proposed by Carl Jung, referring to a deeper layer of the psyche containing universal, inherited structures and archetypes that are shared among all humans. Confirmatory bias, the tendency to favor information that confirms one's previously held beliefs or expectations and to ignore or reject evidence to the contrary. Conscious mind, the part of the mind that contains thoughts, feelings, and memories that are currently in awareness and accessible to conscious experience. Conservation, in Piaget's theory of cognitive development, the understanding that the quantity, length, or number of objects remains the same despite changes in their appearance or arrangement. Conservation is a key aspect of concrete operational thought. Countertransference, the redirection of a psychotherapist's feelings and desires toward a client. Countertransference can provide valuable insights into the client's dynamics but can also interfere with the therapeutic process if not managed properly. D. Dissociation, a mental process that causes a disruption in the usually integrated functions of consciousness, memory, identity, or perception. Dissociation can be a coping mechanism in response to trauma and is a feature of dissociative disorders. E. Ego defense mechanisms, unconscious strategies used by the ego to protect against anxiety and other unpleasant feelings. Examples include denial, projection, displacement, sublimation, and rationalization. Empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Empathy involves both cognitive and emotional components and is a key aspect of social cognition and interpersonal relationships. Erikson's psychosocial stages, a theory of personality development proposed by Erik Erikson, which identifies 8 stages of development, each characterized by a unique psychosocial crisis that must be resolved. Evolutionary psychology, an approach that examines how natural selection has shaped the mind and behavior. Evolutionary psychologists study the adaptive value of psychological mechanisms and behaviors in ancestral environments. Existential psychology, a branch of psychology that emphasizes the individual's existence in an uncertain world and the search for meaning, purpose, and authenticity. Key figures include Viktor Frankl, Rollo May, and Irving Yalom. F. Fixed action pattern, a stereotyped, instinctive behavior that is triggered by a specific stimulus and proceeds to completion, even if the original stimulus is removed. Examples include mating dances and grooming behaviors in animals. Floating attention, a therapeutic technique, often used in Gestalt therapy, in which the therapist maintains an open, receptive, and non-judgmental awareness of the client's thoughts, feelings, and experiences as they arise in the present moment. Free association, a psychoanalytic technique in which a person is encouraged to express whatever thoughts, feelings, or images come to mind, without censorship or judgment. Free association is used to access the unconscious mind and gain insight into underlying conflicts and desires. G. Gestalt therapy, a humanistic approach to psychotherapy that emphasizes personal growth, self-awareness, and the importance of the present moment. Gestalt therapy uses experiential techniques to help clients become more fully aware of their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. H. Hedonism, the pursuit of pleasure and happiness as the primary goal in life. In psychology, hedonism is often discussed in the context of motivation and decision-making, as well as the potential downsides of an overemphasis on pleasure-seeking. Hierarchy of needs, a theory proposed by Abraham Maslow, which organizes human needs into a pyramid-shaped hierarchy, ranging from basic physiological needs at the bottom to self-actualization at the top. According to Maslow, individuals must satisfy lower-level needs before they can address higher-level needs. Ideal self, the representation of the person one would like to be, the goals, aspirations, and self-concept that an individual strives for. The ideal self is a key component of self-discrepancy theory, which proposes that discrepancies between the ideal self and the actual self contribute to psychological distress. Imprinting, a form of learning that occurs during a critical period in an animal's development, typically soon after birth, in which the animal forms a strong attachment to the first moving object it sees, usually its mother. Individuation, a concept in analytical psychology, proposed by Carl Jung, that refers to the process of integrating the conscious and unconscious aspects of the psyche to achieve psychological wholeness and self-realization. Inferential statistics, a branch of statistics that involves making inferences or generalizations about a population based on a sample of data. Inferential statistics includes hypothesis testing, confidence intervals, and regression analysis. Internal working model, a mental representation of self and others that develops from early attachment experiences and guides an individual's expectations, thoughts, and behaviors in relationships throughout life. Interpersonal psychotherapy, IPT, a time-limited, structured psychotherapy that focuses on improving interpersonal relationships and social functioning. IPT is often used to treat depression, anxiety, and eating disorders. Intrapersonal intelligence, one of Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences, referring to the capacity to understand one's own emotions, motivations, and thoughts, as well as the ability to use this self-knowledge to guide behavior and achieve personal growth. L. Locus of control, the degree to which an individual believes that they have control over the outcomes of events in their life, as opposed to external forces. People with an internal locus of control believe they have more control, while those with an external locus of control attribute outcomes to luck, chance, or powerful others. M. Mentalization, the ability to understand and interpret one's own and others' behaviors in terms of intentional mental states, such as desires, beliefs, and emotions. Mentalization is a key component of secure attachment and healthy interpersonal relationships. Metacognition, thinking about thinking, the awareness and understanding of one's own cognitive processes. Metacognition includes knowledge about cognition, as well as the regulation and orchestration of cognitive activities. Mindfulness, a state of active, open attention to the present moment, characterized by non-judgmental awareness of thoughts, feelings, and sensations. Mindfulness is cultivated through meditation and other mindfulness practices and has been shown to reduce stress, improve emotional regulation, and enhance overall well-being. Mirror neurons, neurons that fire both when an individual performs an action and when they observe the same action performed by another. Mirror neurons are believed to play a crucial role in imitation, empathy, and social cognition. Moral development, the process through which individuals develop the ability to make judgments about right and wrong, as well as the capacity to act in accordance with those judgments. Lawrence Kohlberg's theory of moral development identifies 6 stages of moral reasoning, ranging from pre-conventional to post-conventional levels. N. Neurogenesis, the process by which new neurons are generated from neural stem cells and incorporated into existing neural circuits. Neurogenesis occurs primarily in the hippocampus and plays a crucial role in learning, memory, and mood regulation. O. Operant conditioning, a type of learning in which the likelihood of a behavior occurring is increased or decreased by the consequences that follow it. B.F. Skinner's work with reinforcement and punishment schedules is a classic example of operant conditioning. P. Person-centered therapy, a humanistic approach to psychotherapy, developed by Carl Rogers, that emphasizes the therapeutic relationship, empathy, unconditional positive regard, and congruence as key factors in promoting personal growth and self-actualization. Phenotype, the observable characteristics or traits of an organism, resulting from the interaction of its genetic makeup, genotype, and the environment. Positive psychology, a branch of psychology that focuses on the scientific study of human flourishing, including the strengths, virtues, and optimal functioning that enable individuals and communities to thrive. Primitive reflexes, inborn, stereotyped motor patterns that are triggered by specific stimuli and require no learning or practice. Primitive reflexes are typically present at birth and disappear as the nervous system matures, often replaced by more complex, voluntary movements. Projective identification, a psychological defense mechanism in which an individual unconsciously projects their own unwanted feelings or qualities onto another person, and then identifies with the attributes of that person. Projective identification is often discussed in the context of object relations theory and psychotherapy. Psychoeducation, the process of providing education and information about mental health conditions, treatments, and coping strategies to individuals with mental illness and their families. Psychoeducation aims to empower individuals, reduce stigma, and improve treatment outcomes. Psychometrics, the field of psychology concerned with the theory and technique of psychological measurement, including the design, administration, and interpretation of psychological tests and assessments. Psychopathology, the scientific study of mental disorders, including their causes, symptoms, and treatments. Psychopathology encompasses a wide range of mental health conditions, from neurotic and psychotic disorders to personality disorders and developmental disabilities. Psychosexual development, a theory proposed by Sigmund Freud, which describes the development of an individual's personality and psychosexual identity through a series of stages, each focused on a different erogenous zone: oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital. Psychosomatic, relating to or involving the influence of the mind on the body, often in the context of physical symptoms that are exacerbated or caused by emotional or psychological factors. Punishment, in operant conditioning, a consequence that decreases the likelihood of a behavior recurring. Punishment can be positive, adding an unpleasant stimulus, or negative, removing a pleasant stimulus. R. Rational emotive behavior therapy, REBT, a cognitive behavioral approach to psychotherapy, developed by Albert Ellis, that focuses on identifying and challenging irrational beliefs and assumptions that contribute to psychological distress. Reality principle, the component of the psyche, associated with the ego, that mediates between the demands of the ID, the superego, and the external world. The reality principle helps individuals delay gratification and find realistic ways to satisfy their needs and desires. Repression, an unconscious defense mechanism in which painful, unacceptable, or threatening thoughts, feelings, or memories are pushed into the unconscious mind, making them inaccessible to conscious awareness. Resistance, in psychoanalysis, the opposing forces within the psyche that work against the emergence of unconscious thoughts, feelings, or memories into conscious awareness. Resistance can manifest as avoidance, denial, or other defensive behaviors. Retroactive interference, a type of memory disturbance in which newly learned information impairs the recall of previously learned information. Retroactive interference can occur in both short-term and long-term memory and is a common cause of forgetting. Schema, a cognitive framework or conceptual structure that organizes and interprets information about the world. Schemas are developed through experience and can influence perception, memory, and problem-solving. Self-compassion, the practice of directing kindness and understanding toward oneself, rather than judgment and criticism. Self-compassion involves recognizing one's own suffering, being kind to oneself, and acknowledging that suffering is a shared human experience. Self-efficacy, the belief in one's ability to execute the behaviors necessary to produce specific performance attainments. Self-efficacy is a key component of social cognitive theory and plays a crucial role in motivation, learning, and achievement. Self-fulfilling prophecy, a prediction that directly or indirectly influences people and ensures that the prediction is correct, due to positive or negative feedback between belief and behavior. The concept was popularized by Robert K. Merton and has applications in various fields, including psychology, sociology, and education. Sensate focus, a technique developed by Masters and Johnson for treating sexual dysfunction, involving a structured program of touching and exploring one's own body and that of a partner to increase awareness, sensitivity, and pleasure. Social cognition, the study of how people process, store, and apply information about other people and social situations. Social cognition encompasses a wide range of topics, including attribution, stereotyping, prejudice, and interpersonal perception. Social learning theory, a theory of learning and motivation, proposed by Albert Bandura, that emphasizes the role of observation, imitation, and modeling in the acquisition of new behaviors, as well as the influence of cognitive, behavioral, and environmental factors on learning and motivation. Sublimation, a defense mechanism in which socially unacceptable impulses or idealizations are consciously transformed into socially acceptable activities or behaviors, often resulting in a sense of fulfillment and satisfaction. Transference love, a phenomenon in psychotherapy in which a client redirects their feelings for a significant person in their life onto the therapist, often leading to an intense emotional attachment. Unconditional love, a concept in humanistic psychology, often associated with Carl Rogers, referring to the complete acceptance and support of a person regardless of their actions or behaviors. Unconditional love is a key component of unconditional positive regard. Vicarious learning, the process of learning by observing the behavior and outcomes of others, without direct experience. Vicarious learning is a key component of social learning theory and has applications in education, therapy, and skill development. Working memory, a system for temporarily storing and manipulating information necessary for complex cognitive tasks, such as reasoning, comprehension, and learning. Working memory is distinct from short-term memory and long-term memory and plays a crucial role in cognitive processing and problem-solving. This expanded list provides more detailed definitions and covers a broader range of psychology terms and concepts. What are the usages of psychology? Psychology, a multifaceted discipline, encompasses a broad spectrum of applications that permeate various facets of human life and society. The utilization of psychological principles and theories can be exemplified across numerous domains, including but not limited to, clinical settings, educational institutions, organizational structures, and forensic contexts. Here are some highly academic examples. Clinical psychology, this application involves the diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of mental, emotional, and behavioral disorders. For instance, a clinical psychologist might employ cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, to alleviate symptoms of depression in a patient, utilizing techniques such as cognitive restructuring and behavioral activation. Educational psychology, in academic settings, educational psychologists apply their knowledge to enhance learning and teaching processes. For example, they might implement differential reinforcement schedules to modify classroom behavior, or utilize constructivist learning theories to design curricula that foster deeper understanding and knowledge retention. Industrial organizational, IO, psychology, IO psychologists focus on the behavior of people in the workplace. An example includes the implementation of structured job interviews and psychometric assessments to predict job performance and facilitate optimal employee selection. Forensic psychology. This application involves the intersection of psychological principles with the legal system. A forensic psychologist might provide expert testimony on the mental state of a defendant at the time of a crime, or conduct a risk assessment to determine the likelihood of recidivism. Health psychology. Health psychologists explore the interpersonal, intrapsychic, and environmental factors that influence health and illness. An example is the development of interventions to promote adherence to medical regimens, such as using self-efficacy enhancement strategies to encourage patients to manage chronic illnesses more effectively. Social psychology. This branch examines how people think about, influence, and relate to others. For instance, social psychologists might study the dynamics of conformity and obedience in group settings, or investigate the psychological underpinnings of prejudice and discrimination. Developmental psychology. Developmental psychologists study human growth and change across the lifespan. An application might involve designing early intervention programs for children with developmental delays, utilizing Piaget's theory of cognitive development to create age-appropriate educational activities. Neuropsychology. Neuropsychologists specialize in understanding the relationship between the brain and behavior. An example includes conducting neuropsychological assessments to evaluate cognitive impairments following traumatic brain injury, using tools such as the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, WAIS, and the Halstead-Riten Battery. Positive psychology. This application focuses on the scientific study of human flourishing and a good life. A positive psychologist might develop interventions to cultivate gratitude and mindfulness, aiming to enhance subjective well-being and life satisfaction. Psychometrics. Psychometricians specialize in the theory and technique of psychological measurement. An example includes the development and validation of psychological tests, such as intelligence quotient, IQ, tests or personality inventories, to ensure their reliability.